Hola mi gente, ¿cómo están? Aquí Alomar, me pueden decir Alba. El canal se llama Seriel, estamos aquí para hablar de libros y algunos en español desde Puerto Rico. Good morning everybody, April 1st. It's time to do a transition from March into April. My name is Alba. The channel is Seriel and we're here to talk about books and some of them from Puerto Rico in Spanish. It's been quite a busy month, and despite all the activity, I'm encouraged because there's been progress. Yeah, I'm set up for April already in my Bujo, my book Bujo for April. Started off already, and I have to include the books that I think I'm going to get to. But first, what happened in March? I'm still plugging away. I told you, if I didn't finish in March, I'd finish in April with Canaan's Edge. Canaan's Edge, America in the King Years from 1965 to 1968 by Taylor Branch. Finally, at the end of, getting to the end of 1965, and Hoover's outmaneuvered his boss, Nicholas Katzenbach, who didn't want illegal bugging because that involved trespassing. But Hoover got around it. Yeah, that was interesting. And then there was the tragic self-immolation of Norman Morrison in November 2nd of 1965. He was protesting against the war in Vietnam. And then Viola Luso's murderers were acquitted, as were most of the murderers of civil rights activists at that time. And then my nationalist heroines, I'm halfway through. I read about Carmen Perez, who some people erroneously thought that she was Pedro Albizu Campo, who was the president of the Nationalist Party. They thought she was his personal secretary, but she wasn't. She was just an admirer who would volunteer at the Nationalist office. She was a neighbor. She lived close by, and she was arrested in 1950. And they talked about her stay in prison, and then we got to Ruth Mary Reynolds, which was the only North American person who was arrested during the insurrections of 1950. It's a fascinating read, especially about Ruth Reynolds, and they talk about where she was born in in South Dakota, and her college years and her formation as a teacher and as a pacifist. And that's how she finally learned about the Puerto Rican nationalists. And she joined the Harlem Ashram. That's how, that was in Harlem, of course. And that's where she met the first Puerto Ricans in her life and learned about the independence movement. Engrossing reading, except that I was a little disappointed that the author of this book, Olga Jimenez de Wagenheim, who I highly respect as a historian, but she didn't really mention how Ruth Reynolds how she finally got in touch with her lawyer, Conrad Lynn. Conrad Lynn was a black civil rights lawyer who had already tried numerous discrimination cases of soldiers, black soldiers, who refused to be drafted in a segregationist army. And I knew about that because I had read this book, La Mordaza, which is about our gag law, Law 53, which resembled your Smith Law, that outlawed, right? Nationalist people outlawed the flag, flying Puerto Rican flag, and a number of other activities. And it says so right here. The importance of Conrad Lynn is that Conrad Lynn was related to the ACLU, and the ACLU, the national ACLU, refused to get involved against Law 53. Conrad Lynn was fundamental. He was essential in getting the gag law number 53 abolished. So I was a little disappointed that he wasn't mentioned more than he was. He was mentioned, but he was crucial in getting the law abolished and therefore getting her, Ruth Reynolds, freed finally, and a number of other nationalists in 1954 and 1957 when it was finally abolished. So yeah. And then I finished reconsidering the insular cases. I finished. I have a few pages left for Cox Alomar, who ran for resident commissioner for the Popular Democratic Party. And since I basically know what the Popular Democratic Party has to say about our relationship, I'll probably go back when I feel a little bit more sturdy. But this was gripping. This was gripping. And I'm going to continue reading about the insular cases because they still abide, right? They're the ones that say we belong to the territories, the unincorporated territories, belong to but are not a part of the United States. So when people say Puerto Rico is part of the United States, they're U.S. citizens. Nah. Okay. So, and I finished another audiobook. I finished View of the Empire at Sunset. I've just finished that yesterday. And it was recommended over at Mel's Bookland Adventures as a book that had to do with the colonial situation in the West Indies, the British West Indies. I didn't know Dominica belonged to the British West Indies. I thought it was French. But anyway, something I learned. And as it turned out, it was a novelization of the life of novelist Jean Rhys, right? This was sad, nostalgic, right? It had all the atmosphere of someone who is undergoing homesickness and angst. I mistakenly thought that it was going to deal with native, right, islanders' colonial experience, but no. This had to do with someone who was very well off in the islands, who had estates. Her father was a Welsh doctor, and but nonetheless, she felt very rooted to her island. But she was shipped off to live in England by her own mother. And the whole novel just drags out that angst and that homesickness, right? And she got into heavy drinking and a lot of other details in her life. And what I loved the most was the person who read the audio book. Her name is Justine Eyre. Eyre like in Jane Eyre. Justine Eyre. Oh, she was a wonderful voice actress. And that last sentence, the last sentence was everything in this novel. So, yeah, good book. Then, March Mystery Madness has to run into April. One morning, as I was having breakfast, I said, well, let's open up this book and see what it's like. I've never, read a Puerto Rican mystery. And I was bowled over. This is hilarious. I only read up to 40 pages. It is a novel written in emails. And it starts off with a little tiny question that is asked by the Brazilian president to the French ambassador in Brazil. And he asks about Voltaire and where is Voltaire buried, and if they finally found him, and she's up in arms. And it starts a flurry of emails back and forth to all the bureaucratic offices. It is hilarious. I have laughed so much, but I only got to page 40 because I want this to be my reward for finishing my mammoth. I'm going to need it. I'm going to need the laughs. This is apparently a satire of, partly a satire of bureaucrats. So funny. So what's coming up in April? March was had a lot of activities, a lot of unexpected losses also, so yeah, life has gotten into the way of reading. But as you know, calendar events are very important for me. So in April, you know that it's when we celebrate the earth, Pachamama, and I had already wanted to read this one by Naomi Klein. This Changes Everything. This has been on my TBR for a long time, and I really admire Naomi Klein, so I hope to get to this one. I'm going to say hope. I'm not going to say I'm going to get to it. I hope to get to it. And then on April the 8th is when we commemorate the birth of the father of our homeland, Ramón Emeterio Betances, which you see right over there. Ramón Emeterio Betances, who was crucial in the abolitionist movement and the independence movement in Puerto Rico in the 19th century. And so I got this book, Ada Suárez Díaz, El Doctor Ramón Emeterio Betances y la Abolición de la Esclavitud. He would buy babies, black babies, at the baptismal font to be able to free them. Yeah, he's a great doctor too. Very humanitarian doctor. And then there's another birthday. This one is the birthday of José Maldonado. I will link his Wikipedia article, which is fascinating, at the bottom in the description notes. This is a historical novel by Reinaldo Marcos Padua. It's called Águila, about this folkloric sort of Robin Hood-like figure in Puerto Rico at the turn of the century and between the two different empires, right? And there's a lot of myths and a lot of legends surrounding José Maldonado. Águila Blanca was his name, Águila Blanca. And so I've been dying to read this one for a long, long time. This was published, I think, in 2010. 2010? Let me check. This was published in 2008. And more or less around 2010 was when I discovered this book, and I really want to get to it. Fascinating story. Then it's going to be Easter, and I was trying to decide what I would read for Easter, whether José Saramago, El Evangelio de Jesucristo. I have a lot of other books on the church and on religion that I always read. I had one called Jesus for the Non-Religious by Sprung. I wanted to give that a reread. I read that one already. But I found this one that I had been waiting for the longest time. This is a reprint in 1981 by Samuel Silva Gotay. Now, Samuel Silva Gotay, the title of the book is El pensamiento cristiano revolucionario en América Latina y el Caribe, los orígenes de la teología latinoamericana de liberación. Revolutionary Christian thought in Latin America and the Caribbean, the origins of liberation theology, by Samuel Silva Gotay. Samuel Silva Gotay was the assistant dean of students at the University of Puerto Rico when I first arrived. And he is one of the people who would take us around the island because we were considered exchange students. The ones who came from Chicago, there was a group of us who came from Chicago to study at the University of Puerto Rico, and we were included among the exchange students that came from different parts of the United States and other countries. And he would organize, along with the dean of students, excursions around the island so that we would get to know the island. And he's one of the people who is most responsible for my love of the island. I had never seen anything so gorgeous, so much natural beauty in my whole life. Having been brought up in Chicago, I had never seen so many shades of green. I had never seen such a sky. I had never seen so many houses tittering on poles and pillars on the hillsides. I was fascinated, and I fell in love with my island, and it's largely due to him. Now, Samuel Silva Gotay is a theologian, and he is of the Baptist persuasion, and wrote a book called Protestantism in the turn of the century in Puerto Rico, because that's when the invasion of the United States, Protestantism made a big surge here in Puerto Rico, and that was a wonderful history book. I understood so many things through that book on Protestantism, so I was waiting for this one. Samuel Silva Gotay, El pensamiento cristiano revolucionario en América Latina y el Caribe, which was one of the first books that he wrote. He's written so many books since then. I really admire Samuel Silva Gotay. So, and then for Aussie April, I have The Strays. I had already decided to read The Strays through Mel's Bookland Adventures Reading Around the World challenge. So yeah, I'm going to be reading The Strays. I've already borrowed it from the library on Overdrive. So yeah, I hope to be finishing that this month. There were a lot of other books, and there are a lot of other books that are being transferred from March into April, but you already know what they are, so I'm not going to mention them again. I hope to get to them all. Wish me luck, people. I'm going to be drinking a lot of water to avoid senior moments. like that senior moment that I had in that video where I called the march from Selma to Montgomery, Selma to Birmingham. No, it's not Birmingham. And I do that sometimes. So you can call me out on the comments down below. Take care, people. Have a wonderful day. Nos vemos. Cuídense mucho. Adiós.